The room was silent, not the peaceful kind. The kind that fills stone walls over centuries and refuses to leave. The kind that means something has already been decided. It was a Thursday morning in late autumn at Windsor Castle. The light through the tall, leaded windows was gray and thin, and King Charles sat alone at his writing desk, reportedly with only his most senior private secretary present, standing near the door, hands clasped, eyes forward. On the desk lay a single document, 2 pages, typed formally, one space at the bottom for a signature. Charles read it twice. Then he picked up his pen. What he signed in that moment, according to sources close to the royal household, would quietly restructure the internal architecture of the British monarchy in a way no public announcement had prepared anyone for. No press release, no formal statement, no warning to anyone inside Buckingham Palace except the 2 people who needed to know first. One of those people was Catherine, Princess of Wales. She received the call at Kensington Palace, reportedly mid-morning, while preparing for the school run. Those present described her as completely still when she heard what was being told to her. She asked no questions. She listened. She said very little. And when she set the phone down, she stood at the window for a long moment before turning back to the room. By that afternoon, it had been confirmed through internal palace channels. Catherine now held sole custodial authority over the crown jewels of the United Kingdom. Not shared authority, not advisory authority, sole authority. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe now and turn on your notifications. What I am about to tell you goes much deeper than a title on a document. Stay with me. Now, the crown jewels are not simply precious objects. They are the physical embodiment of sovereign continuity, the orb, the scepter, the imperial state crown. The objects held and worn at coronations, at the precise moment when one reign ends and another begins. Custodial authority over them carries constitutional weight, and for that authority to rest solely with Catherine, not with Camilla, who holds the title of queen, not with palace officers alone, was, according to senior royal observers, without modern precedent. But that wasn't the real surprise. Because what nobody outside a very small circle knew that morning, what sources say, even some senior aides were not told until later, was that this decision had not been made quickly. It had not been made in response to a single incident or a single conversation. It had been building for years. And at the center of it, before any document was drafted or any phone call made, was a letter. A letter that Diana had written before she died. A letter that, according to those who have seen it described, named no one directly, but made everything perfectly clear. The question that moved through the household that afternoon, passed in low voices between people who had served the crown for decades, was not whether Charles had signed it. The signature was real. The document was filed. That was settled. The question was what Camilla had been told. Because sources close to the family suggest that Camilla had expected something very different from that Thursday. She had reportedly anticipated a meeting, a quiet confirmation of arrangements she believed had long been agreed. Instead, she received silence. And somewhere across London, a woman stood at a window in Kensington Palace, holding the weight of something she had not asked for, and understanding, perhaps for the first time with complete clarity, exactly why it had been given to her. To understand how this moment arrived, we have to go back, not weeks, not months. We have to go back to Diana. Diana wore those jewels. Not always by choice, royal protocol governs such things with a precision that leaves little room for personal preference. But she wore them at state banquets, at Commonwealth receptions, at the great formal occasions where the weight of history presses against you and demands that you carry it with grace. Those who attended those occasions and are still willing to speak about them say Diana wore them differently from anyone before or since. Not carelessly, not performatively, as though she understood in some deep and private way that they were never hers and chose, in that understanding, to carry them with something close to reverence. She reportedly said once, in a private conversation recounted by a close friend, that the jewels were the only part of official royal life she never questioned. Everything else, she said, could be argued over, negotiated, taken away, but the jewels belonged to the nation. And the nation, at least, she trusted completely. Camilla's relationship with those same jewels has always been something else entirely. When Charles and Camilla married in April 2005, a quiet civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall, deliberately understated by royal standards, the question of Camilla's custodial standing over the historic royal collection was never formally resolved. Not publicly, not privately either. What existed instead, according to senior sources, was a fragile architecture of informal understandings and unspoken assumptions. Workable, perhaps, under calm conditions. Fragile the moment real pressure arrived. And pressure, eventually, always arrives. But here is what most people do not know. The event that sources consistently identify as the true turning point did not involve a confrontation. It did not involve a public incident or a palace crisis. It involved a letter. Diana had written it in the late 1990s. She entrusted it to a small number of people she believed would protect it, people who understood its significance well enough to know it should never surface carelessly and never disappear entirely. The letter was not, by the accounts of those who have seen it described, a letter of anger. It carried none of the rawness of someone settling scores. What made it extraordinary was its subject and its tone. Diana had written, reportedly in careful and deliberate language, about the crown jewels, about their meaning, about what she believed should govern their custodianship in any future where the monarchy was asked to carry both her memory and the weight of everything that came after. She named no one by title, but those who read it said the intent was unmistakable. She was writing about the kind of woman who should one day hold that responsibility, a woman of patience, of dignity, held quietly rather than perform for the cameras. A woman who would choose the institution over herself not because she was told to, but because she understood what it existed for. When Catherine married William in April 2011, she had no knowledge of this letter. Neither, reportedly, did William. It remained where Diana had left it, held privately, carefully, by people who were waiting, perhaps without fully knowing it, for the right moment. That moment came unexpectedly. The letter surfaced within senior household circles. The precise circumstances remain a matter of careful discretion, and when it did not create an immediate crisis. What it created, according to sources, was a conversation, long, private, conducted between Charles and a very small number of his most trusted advisors over a period of months. Camilla was not part of that conversation, not because she was excluded carelessly, but because the question the conversation was trying to answer made her presence in the room impossible. The question, as sources have since framed it, was this: if Diana had written in her own hand a vision for who should stand closest to the crown, was there any version of honoring her in which that vision could simply be set aside? The answer, it appears, was no. But there was a second complication, one that sources say made the decision both more necessary and significantly harder. Because in the months before Charles signed that document, Camilla had reportedly begun to position herself more assertively in matters relating to the royal collection. Small moves, careful ones, the kind that individually appear unremarkable but collectively, to those watching closely, told a clear story about where she believed her authority was heading. Senior aides noticed. They documented what they observed, and according to multiple accounts, what they documented eventually found its way into the same quiet conversation that had begun with Diana's letter. It connected two things that had previously seemed separate: Diana's vision for the future and Camilla's vision for herself. They were not the same vision. Charles, by all accounts, took his time. He is not, those close to him say, a man who acts on instinct in matters that carry constitutional weight. He considers, he consults. He sits with discomfort longer than most people can tolerate, because he understands that some decisions, once made, cannot be walked back. He sat with this one for the better part of a year, and then, on a gray Thursday morning in late autumn, he picked up his pen. What no one inside the palace fully anticipated, not even those closest to the process, was how Camilla would respond when she was finally told. That meeting had been arranged for a Wednesday, and what happened inside that room would be described afterward by those who heard the account as the most quietly devastating exchange the royal family had witnessed in years. The meeting was called for a Wednesday. No official calendar entry, no formal record, just a small private sitting room at Windsor that Charles has used for personal meetings since the earliest years of his reign, firelit, quiet, furnished with the kind of old pieces that carry their own authority simply by existing long enough. Charles was already seated when Camilla arrived. Those who have spoken about what followed describe the opening moments as deceptively calm. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not, reportedly, begin with pleasantries either. He opened the way he opens conversations that have already been decided directly and without apology. He told her a decision had been made, that it was not the result of a single grievance or a single moment, that it was the conclusion of a long, honest process of reflection about what the Crown required going forward. Then he told her about the document. Camilla's response, according to a source with direct knowledge of the exchange, was not the response of someone completely blindsided. It was the response of someone who had been waiting for a version of this conversation for a long time and had hoped, until that precise moment, that it would never fully arrive. She asked one question. She asked whether Catherine already knew. Charles told her Catherine had been informed that morning. The silence that followed, sources say, lasted long enough to feel like its own answer. What Camilla said next, reportedly, was not what anyone who knew her might have predicted. There were no demands, no ultimatums, no raised voices in that firelit room. Instead, she reached for something that those who heard the account afterward described as genuine and heartbreaking in its timing. She said she had given the Crown everything it asked of her, every condition accepted, every constraint absorbed, every quiet indignity of a position the institution had never quite decided how to honor. She had carried all of it, she said, without complaint. Charles, reportedly, did not dispute a word of it. What he said instead has since been recounted by more than one source as the sentence that defined the entire exchange. He said that Diana had also given everything the Crown asked of her, and that the Crown this time intended to remember it. Camilla left the room without the authority she had arrived, believing she held. No announcement, no formal statement. Just a closed door and a corridor and the particular weight of a decision that had already moved past the point where anything she said could change it. But that wasn't the end of what happened that Wednesday. Because while Camilla was leaving Windsor, a phone call was being placed to Kensington Palace. Princess Anne was calling Catherine. Anne is not, by any account, a woman who uses 3 words when one will do, or 1 word when silence carries more. Those who know her best describe her phone calls as efficient to the point of being almost austere. This one, reportedly, was different. Sources describe it as uncharacteristically warm. Anne told Catherine that what had happened was right, that it was overdue, and that Diana, in her considered opinion, would have understood it completely even if she never could have anticipated its precise form. Catherine, those present said, cried quietly after the call ended. Not from relief alone. From something harder to name, the particular grief of receiving recognition that arrives in the shape of someone else's absence. Because everything given to her that day had been given, in some essential way, because of a woman who was not there to see it. She went, reportedly, to the small table in her private sitting room where she keeps a photograph of Diana. Not a formal portrait, a candid image. Diana laughing, head slightly turned, caught in a moment of pure and unguarded delight. Catherine stood there for a long time. No one who was present described what she said, if she said anything at all. Some moments, those who were there seemed to understand, do not belong to the record. By the following morning, the formal confirmation had moved through internal palace channels with quiet efficiency. Departments briefed, documentation filed, the structure locked into place. But it was what happened in the corridors outside those formal processes that sources describe as the truest measure of what had changed. Senior household staff, people who have spent careers reading the interior weather of the royal family, with the accuracy of instruments, describe the atmosphere at Windsor the day after as simply different. Not dramatically, not visibly, just different. The way a room feels different, one source reportedly said, when something that has been quietly wrong for a very long time has finally, without fanfare, been set right. And in a classroom across London, Princess Charlotte sat at her desk wearing a small sapphire bracelet, a gift from her mother. Blue, deep and clear, the particular shade those who knew Diana best have always associated with her most characteristic pieces. Nobody who saw it that day knew what it meant. But some things carry their meaning forward without needing to be explained. Justice, when it finally arrives, rarely announces itself. It does not come with noise or ceremony. It does not fill front pages or interrupt scheduled programming. It comes the way the most lasting things come, quietly, deliberately, in the shape of a decision made by someone who understood that some wrongs are not corrected in a single dramatic moment. They are corrected in the patient, irreversible accumulation of right ones. What Charles signed that Thursday morning was, on its surface, an administrative document. Formal language, 2 pages, 1 signature. But those who understand how the monarchy truly communicates not in press releases or public statements, but in gesture and symbol, and the precise weight of who holds what described it as something the institution had not produced in a very long time. A reckoning, Camilla retained her title, her residence, her public schedule, and the formal courtesies her position demands. The exterior of the institution remained, as it always does, composed and unreadable. But inside that exterior, in the rooms and decisions and quiet conversations, where the royal family actually governs itself, the architecture had permanently shifted. And Catherine moved through that shift with characteristic understatement. She did not speak about it publicly. She drew no attention to what had changed. What those close to her described instead was a new quality of settled purposefulness, the way a person carries themselves when they know, for the first time in a long time, that the ground beneath them is completely solid. She visited the jewel rooms at the Tower of London shortly after the confirmation. A private visit, unannounced. Those present said she moved slowly through the rooms, looking carefully at each piece, at the history recorded beside it, at the long, unbroken line of people who had worn these objects at the moments when history turned. She paused longest at the pieces Diana had worn. No performance, no gesture designed to be observed. Just a woman standing inside centuries of history, taking her time, understanding what she was now responsible for, and what that responsibility connected her to. But the moment that sources say has stayed most clearly with those who witnessed it did not happen at the Tower of London. It did not happen in a palace corridor or a formal meeting room. It happened on an ordinary weekend morning. William was with his children George, Charlotte, and Louis. The kind of quiet domestic morning that palace life always makes more complicated than it should be. Charlotte, reportedly, had been looking at a book. She looked up and asked her father a question about the crown jewels. A child's question, simple and direct. William answered carefully, the way he always does when his children ask him about the monarchy's meaning. And then he said something that wasn't part of the answer. He told her that the jewels had been carried by people who gave everything for the crown and the country, that the most important thing about them was not their age or their value, but what they represented, the idea that some things are held in trust, that you receive them from those who came before you. You care for them, and you pass them forward. Charlotte listened with the particular stillness she has always had, serious, unhurried, in a way that has reminded those who knew Diana of someone they once loved completely. She asked William one more question. She asked if the people who held them before had been good people. William was quiet for a moment. Then he said yes, that some of them had been the best people he had ever known. He did not say her name. He did not need to. Diana has been gone for nearly 3 decades. The extraordinary public grief of September 1997, the flowers, the silence, the crowds that filled the streets of London and would not leave has quieted, as grief eventually does, into something more private, something carried rather than displayed. But it has not disappeared. It lives in the choices William makes when the institution requires correction. It lives in the way Catherine moves through rooms full of history and understands without being told what she is there to protect. And it lives in a little girl asking her father if the people who came before were good. A document signed on a quiet Thursday morning cannot bring Diana back. Nothing can do that. But it can say, in the careful and encoded language the monarchy reserves for its most important communications, that her vision for the crown was never forgotten, that it was, in the end, honored. Some things, it turns out, are worth the wait. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Catherine was always meant to be the true guardian of Diana's legacy within the royal family? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. Because there is always more.